In this chapter, we're going to be expanding what we saw in the previous chapter by adding the government and international trade back into the aggregate expenditure equation to really complete this whole concept. So just a little recap. G, right? The G component of GDP in aggregate expenditure is government purchases. And what's part of government purchases is any purchases of goods and services by the government. Includes any work done by the government, any salaries paid to employees of the government, any third-party services. So if the government has to pay a third party to come and shovel the snow, all that. What's not included would be transfer payments, payments that are money given from the government to people, like, for example, welfare. Government is also, like investments, considered to be autonomous. So it is not a function of income. It's not variable. It is fixed. Regardless of national income, there's going to be government purchases. Now, that's not to say they can't increase or decrease. They can increase or decrease, and they do increase and decrease, but they don't increase or decrease as a function of income. The government might just decide we're going to start spending more money, or we're going to start spending less money. We'll talk about different monetary policies and fiscal policies as we work through the semester, but understand autonomous just means it does not increase or decrease based on income. Now, there's something called a government budget balance, and we have a whole chapter on this in macroeconomics towards the end. But basically, the government budget balance is the difference between the money that the government brings in from taxes and the money that the government spends on its purchases. So let's talk about tax revenue first of all. Tax revenue is very simple. It's based on national income. T, capital T, is tax revenue. Small t, or lowercase t, is your tax rate. Y is your income. So, for example, if the government's tax rate is 30%, so say, for example, that the government's tax rate is 30%. That means that they're going to tax every dollar earned within the economy at 30%. So lowercase t, 0.3. So the total tax revenue would be 30% of national income. That's how much money the government's bringing in. Okay, that's one thing. Put that aside. G is what we're spending. Okay, so the government's bringing in money from taxes, but then it's going out and spending on employees, it's going out and spending on goods and services and all these things. So the budget balance is the difference between those two things. When the government is bringing more money in, we say the government is running a surplus, where it has more tax revenue than the money it's spending. When the government is spending more, so when G exceeds T, we say the government is running a deficit, and when they're equal, the budget is balanced. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. We're going to have a chapter where we talk about what happens when there's a surplus, what happens when there's a deficit. For now, just understand that is how it's determined. It's just a comparison of how much money I'm bringing in as a government versus how much money I'm spending. Okay, a few practice questions on that to get warmed up. So G and T components of national income measures purchases and net taxes collected by. The answer here is all levels of the government. It's not any particular government. It's not federal, not provincial. It's just all levels. Transfer payments made by the government affect its net tax revenues. How? So now, to understand this, we need to go back on what we talked about here. This second bullet point mentions that transfer payments, so things like welfare, are deducted directly from net tax revenue. Now, we don't really have to do this actively in a question. It's just something to understand conceptually that net tax revenue, what makes it net, is that it's net of transfer payments. So if you do have transfer payments, they affect it directly because we would deduct it from. So the government brings in all of its taxes. It deducts transfer payments. That's net tax revenue. So the answer here is that it affects it directly. Number 3, consider the government budget balance. Suppose government purchases are $2,500. Net tax revenue equals 0.2 times Y. So 0.2 being the tax rate, Y being income. What is the, and then income is $1,100. The government is running a budget what? So we're going to calculate our budget balance here, which is tax minus G. And if I expand that, it's that. So 0.2 times 11,000 minus 2,500. This is 2,200 minus 2,500. We're running a deficit here of 300. The government is spending $300 more than it's getting in taxes. 4. Question number 4, consider the government budget balance. So this is a similar question. This time the government purchases are still 2,500. The taxes are still 20%, but this time you're asked to find at what income would the budget be balanced. So at what point would tax revenue equal your government purchases? That's how you would want to solve a question like this. So we're going to just solve for y. Point 2, which is 12,500. So at a national income level of 12,500, the government would have a budgeted, a balanced budget. Okay, that's it for government purchases. Now let's talk about international trade, imports and exports, basically. So it's quite a bit here. Imports, goods that we are purchasing from foreign suppliers. So this is money that we are giving away, basically. The goods are being produced in some foreign country, and we are buying those goods. So we're giving money away. The economy is basically losing money here. When we import goods, we are giving money away. Therefore, that money is exiting the economy. Imports are considered induced, not autonomous. Induced meaning they are variable and they are a function of our national income. More national income, more imports. Less national income, less imports, meaning they're going to have a slope. And the slope is called the marginal propensity to import, or the symbol for that is M. So we say that imports, the symbol for that being IM for imports, is M, the slope of imports, times Y, your national income. So you see, as Y goes up, imports go up. Exports. This is money coming in. It's the opposite. We are producing the goods here, and we are selling them abroad. Therefore, more money is entering our economy. That's a good thing. Exports are assumed completely autonomous, not a function of national income. So you have a part of this that is autonomous, a part of this that's induced. So when we put it all together, we get the net exports function. Net exports, as we mentioned in one of the earlier chapters, is X, which is exports, minus imports. So now if you expanded that, you'd have something like this. So as an actual function, this is a linear equation with a negative slope. Your net exports, being the Y variable, will actually decrease as your national income increases because imports are negative. The more we import, the lower our net exports get. And you see here again kind of two parts to this. When your exports exceed your imports, we have a trade surplus. We're basically making more money than we're spending on the international market. This is positive for our GDP. This means this is increasing our GDP. But when we're importing more than we're exporting, we start to have a trade deficit, which is negative for our GDP. It means that we're giving away more money on the international market than we're bringing back. Okay. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm showing you all the different components, and we're going to, in a moment, once these are understood and we've done some practice, we're going to put the GDP equation all back together. And all the different slopes and intercepts and all these things will be clarified, hopefully. So here you've got factors that affect the foreign trade, specifically the net export function in the foreign trade. So you got these four factors. Exchange rates. So we talked about this in the first chapter. Exchange rates are basically just the price of one currency in or expressed in another currency. And we're going to focus on the Canadian dollar because we're in a Canadian class. So if the Canadian dollar depreciates, means it loses value versus other currencies, this will increase our exports and decrease our imports. Why? If our currency becomes cheaper, more foreign buyers are going to come to Canada to buy from us because they're getting a discount. Think about it. If our currency is cheaper, somebody from the US can just come and say, well, I'm going to buy this cheap Canadian dollar and then use it to shop in Canada. So we're going to have a lot of exports, but we're not going to have a lot of imports because the opposite is also true. If our currency becomes weaker, it means it becomes more expensive for Canadians to go and buy from another country. If my currency is weaker and I go to the US, now everything is more expensive. So we are less inclined to do that. The other effects would be that because we're importing less, our marginal propensity to import is lower. We are less likely to import. The percentage of every dollar of our income that we spend importing will go down. Now, overall, this is positive because if our net exports are rising, our aggregate expenditure, remember what aggregate expenditure is? If we put it all back together, C plus I plus G plus NX, your net exports. So now we're focusing on this. So you see if this goes up, this goes up. And then your national income will rise as well. So foreign income. This is like the name suggests, income earned by foreigners. Well, so I'll use the US because it's super easy. If Americans all of a sudden have more income, what's going to happen? Well, they're going to come and shop in Canada more. Not just in Canada, but everywhere, right? If foreign income goes up, you're going to have more exports. More Americans traveling to Canada to shop, more American businesses buying from Canada. You're not really going to have a change in imports, though, because that doesn't really affect a Canadian's behavior. So no change in imports. So if your exports go up, your imports don't change, your net exports will also go up, which will have the same effect. Aggregate expenditure and GDP will rise. Foreign prices. If prices in the US all of a sudden went up, what would happen? Think about it. If US goods became more expensive, Americans would start to look elsewhere to buy those goods. So what would happen? Again, our exports would go up because they're going to say, oh, well, the same thing can be bought in Canada for cheaper. I'm going to go buy it there. So we're going to have more exports. At the same time, we're going to import less because a Canadian is going to look at the US market and say, well, your prices went up. I'm not going to buy from you. I'm just going to continue buying locally. So you're going to have a decrease in your imports because of a decrease in your propensity to import. You're not interested in importing. And you'll have the same effect as the depreciation in the Canadian dollar because you have more exports and fewer imports. Your overall GDP will rise because your economy is pumping, right? You're producing more, you're exporting, and you're not giving money away to other economies. And then the opposite is true if the domestic prices rise, the complete opposite. If all of a sudden the price in Canada of goods were to go up, well, then you would have fewer exports because now Americans are looking and saying, oh, the goods in Canada are really expensive. I'm not going to buy from them. So our exports will go down and our imports will rise because a Canadian is going to say, oh, it's actually cheaper for me to go buy it in the US. So you're going to have the opposite effect here. A lot of money leaving Canada, which will be negative for our economy, negative for our aggregate expenditure and for our GDP. So these are the factors. Now remember, because X is autonomous, changes in exports would cause a shift in this line, right? So if I were to draw my net exports line, the intercept up here, those are your exports. Well, if my exports decrease, then you would have a complete downward shift in this line. And if your exports were to increase, you would have an upward shift in this line. If it's your marginal propensity to import, the M that changes, M is the slope. That would be a rotation. So for example, if your M it increases, so for example, it goes from 0.05 to 0.10, that means you're going to import more. Your line will actually become steeper. Your slope is increasing. So it looks something like this. It would rotate inwards. It would become steeper. And vice versa. If you're importing less because your slope decreases, the line will become flatter. Okay, let's do some practice on that. I hope this is clear. If you have any questions, of course, reach me right away. Consider the aggregate expenditure function in a simple macro model with government and foreign trade. It is generally assumed that as real national income, okay, what? If real national income rises, will exports decrease? No, because exports are autonomous. They are not a function of your income. They will actually not change. If your real national income increases or decreases, your exports don't change. B. If your real national income increases, net exports will decrease. Now, this is true. Why? Because net exports is a function of your imports as well. It's X minus IM. And IM, if we expand it, is M times national income. So if you have more national income, then you're going to import more, and so your net exports will actually fall. And you can see it on the graph too. You see, as your national income, as we move right along this axis, which is your national income, your net exports fall. Number 2, a decrease in domestic national income, a decrease in domestic national income. So now if you're looking at that net exports function, we're actually moving left. So for example, going this way, your net exports will increase. We're not going to shift though. This goes back to the whole concept of endogenous versus exogenous variables. National income is endogenous. It is a variable explained by the model. When you have a change in that, you're not shifting your line. You are just moving along. So it is not a shift. It is not a rotation. It is simply a movement. Careful. All these other things, these cause shifts and rotations. But national income only causes a movement. Same with supply and demand. Same with basically every time we've had a graph. Same concept. Okay. Here we have a table. It says the table below shows national income and imports. The level of exports is fixed at 300. So there's your X. Everything is in millions. What are the correct values for A, B, C, D? Okay. Well, remember that net exports is just exports minus imports. And so I'm just going to do 300 minus each of these. So this would be 300 minus 150, which is 150. So there's 300 minus 250, which is 50. And then it becomes negative. 300 minus 350 would be negative 50. And then this would be negative. So 300 minus 450 is negative 150. So A. All right, now is where it really can become a little bit complex, but you know, I'll break it down, and don't be scared to go back and watch it again and again and again. We're going to put it all back together. At the end of the previous chapter, where it was just the simple macro model, we said, remember when it was the simple macro model, where it was just consumption plus investments, and we expanded this, it became this. We took the autonomous parts, put them together. We took the induced part, which was only MPC at that point, put it together, and this was your AE. So we had said that the marginal propensity to spend, the slope of the AE function was just your MPC. But now, because you have other other induced expenditures like imports, and now because we have taxes as well, we're going to expand this. And the slope, the Z basically, the marginal propensity to spend, will expand and become this. So let me explain all the different parts here. Okay, MPC we know, marginal propensity to consume. Now, because there are taxes, we need to multiply this by 1 minus T. Because although you might be consuming, maybe your MPC is 0.7, and we talked about that, that means that you're going to spend 70% of your income. But it's disposable income. And if you have taxes, your disposable income will actually decrease. And so we multiply by 1 minus tax to show the effect of how much we lose in taxes. Basically, our disposable income is decreasing because of taxes, and this is how you factor that in to your spending. 1 minus tax, whenever you guys see 1 minus tax in any class or any topic, that is a net of tax. We're removing the tax and seeing what's left. Minus M, which was your marginal propensity to import. Remember that when we're importing, we're losing money as an economy. We're not making money. So we're giving money away. That's why it's negative. The effect on GDP is negative. The more we give away to other countries, the lower our GDP becomes. So the slope of your AE is actually this whole thing. This is the slope of AE. So now let's put it together. Okay, here you've got the function that you recognize. Aggregate expenditure is C plus I plus G plus NX. It's also autonomous plus induced. So I've organized this. I put all of the autonomous components on the left here. Autonomous consumption, investments, government, and exports, which are always autonomous. And the induced is on the right. You've got induced consumption, and you've got your imports here. This is your imports, and this is your induced consumption. And then we just rearrange it. We factor everything out here, so we end up with our slope. You see, this is basically what we had over here. That's your slope. Let's see. So if you reduce it and you kind of remove all that, this is your AE function. This is your intercept, all of the autonomous intercept. This is your slope. And this is your independent variable. On a graph that we've seen many times already, this whole part, the intercept, is that point right there. And then the slope of this line is Z. Okay. Let that sink in for a moment. And let's move to a summary here of things we talked about in this chapter and the previous chapter. This is really just a summary of all the different factors that affect your aggregate expenditure, how they affect it, and what the effect is on GDP. Very, very, very important to remember this. The simple multiplier is exactly the same formula as the previous chapter. The only thing really that changes here, guys, is Z. When you have this simple macro model with only consumption and investment, Z is just MPC. We talked about this already in this chapter. But now that we've reintroduced government, we've reintroduced international trade, Z is expanded, the slope is expanded to include all of this. So let's take a look. Question number 1, consider a consumption function in a simple macro model with government and taxes, given a marginal propensity to consume out of disposable income of 0.9. So basically 0.9 out of disposable income. And at 10% tax rate, what is the marginal propensity to consume out of national income? And this is really the one that matters. They're asking you basically, how much are you going to spend out of national income? And that's where that first part of the slope that I was talking to you guys about comes in. So MPC multiplied by 1 minus the tax rate is your marginal propensity to consume out of national income. That's why we multiply it by Y and not YD. So really the question is this. What is that? 90% times 1 minus 0.1. 90% times 90% is 0.81. Two, consider a simple macro model with a constant price level and demand determine output. The equations are, okay, the vertical intercept of the AE function. We talked about this. Vertical intercept, this is all of the autonomous. So what's autonomous? If we zoom in, you've got this right here. That's your autonomous consumption. Anything basically, here's a trick. Anything that doesn't have Y in it is autonomous because it's fixed. So that's autonomous. Investment is autonomous. Government is autonomous. And exports are autonomous. So let's add those together. 60 plus 150 plus 260 plus 90. 560. Answer is E. Number 3. Consider a simple macro model. You basically have the same numbers. At a national income of $1,200, what is the desired aggregate expenditure? Okay, so for aggregate expenditure, put it all together. C plus I plus G plus NX, and NX is just exports minus imports. And just plug your income into Y wherever there's Y. So I'll start with consumption. So consumption is 60 plus 0.43 times 1,200. Investments, 150. Government, 260. Exports, 90. Imports, 0.06 times your national income. $1,004 is what I get. Number 4, same numbers. What is the marginal propensity to spend? Basically, what is the slope of the AE function? Well, we know the slope of the AE function is MPC times 1 minus T plus, minus M. That is the formula that I gave you. Now, what you want to do here is you want to be careful with what's presented to you, because even though this is the formula, sometimes you're given parts of it together. What I'm saying here is, when you look at your consumption function, because they've given you the slope as a function of your national income, it means that it's this entire thing. That's 0.43. You don't actually need to do the MPC times 1 minus T. You only need to do it if we give you, like in the first question, if we gave you the marginal propensity to consume out of disposable income. Only then would you have to multiply it by 1 minus T. Here, this is already done for you. So basically, you just want to add, or in this case, subtract, the slope of the consumption function with the slope of imports. And so you would get 0.37. Number 5. In a simple macro model with constant price levels, a decrease in the net tax rate, so tax rate goes down, causes the AE curve to do what? Now, here's the thing. The tax rate affects a slope, because remember that the marginal propensity to consume out of national income is the MPC multiplied by 1 minus the tax. So if the tax rate goes down, it means people have more money to spend. And so your entire slope would rise. And when a slope rises, we know that that causes not a shift, but a rotation. It rotates up. This is one of the, if you go back to this table, if your tax rate goes up, it rotates down. So here, the question was the opposite. If your tax rate falls, you rotate up. Anything affecting a slope, basically, again, look at the slope function. Anything that changes between these three would cause a rotation. Anything that changes on the autonomous side would cause a shift. Number 6, consider the simple macro model. Slightly different numbers than the previous questions. The trade balance at equilibrium national income. The trade balance. Remember that trade balance is your net exports, basically, the difference between exports and imports at the equilibrium national input. So there's actually 2 steps here. First, I'll show you how you calculate the equilibrium, and then we can use it to answer the question. So to find the equilibrium, remember that you have to set AE equal to Y. So we're going to take our aggregate expenditure, which is all of them put together. So 150 plus 0.84Y. That's your C, plus your I, which is 400, plus your G, which is 700. There's no tax. Okay, interesting. And then your net exports. So plus bracket 130 minus 0.08Y. C plus I plus G plus, no, I is the 400. So C plus I plus G plus X minus IM. And then you set that equal to y and solve for it. So let's start here. We're going to group together the slopes, and we'll group together the constants. So 150, I'm actually going to just do it on my calculator. So 150 plus 400 plus 700 plus 130. So the autonomous portion of this is 1380. And then we put together the slopes. 0.84 minus 0.08. 0.84 minus 0.08 is 0.76. Equals y. And then we just clean it up. Send this over. This becomes 1380 equals 0.24y. And then divide 1380 by 0.24. We get 5750. So 5750 is our equilibrium national income. That's how you do that. Okay, if that was the question, we would be done. But the question was, what is the trade balance? So now we're going to take that 5750 and basically plug it back in just to the end here. So I don't have a lot of space. I'll do it up here. 130 minus 0.08 times 5750. A deficit, negative 330. We have a deficit of 330. Okay, so quite a bit to unpack there. Feel free to watch that over and over again. Number 7. Consider the following news headlines. The Minister of Defense announces a $2 billion purchase of military helicopters. Okay, question number 7. Consider the following news headlines. Minister of Defense announces $2 billion purchase of military helicopters. So this is an increase in government expenditure, which is an increase in autonomous expenditure. Just from that first line, where the government is spending more money. Assuming that aggregate output is demand determined and that helicopters are purchased domestically, so we're not importing these, we're making that clear, what will be the effect of this on AE? Okay. So government expenditure goes up, the AE function goes up, and when AE goes up, right, if you look at your AE equilibrium, if this increases, look at your equilibrium GDP. It'll increase. So that's why we say whenever AE is increasing, national income, national output, GDP is all increasing as well. So the AE function will shift down, wrong. The AE function will rotate, wrong, because this is autonomous, so it's a shift. The AE function will rotate, wrong. The AE function will shift up parallel to itself, yes. Equilibrium national income will rise. The answer is C. 8, a decrease in the value of the simple multiplier. A decrease in the value of the simple multiplier can be caused by what? At the end of the previous chapter, and actually in this one, I think I put the note. As your marginal propensity to spend increases, the multiplier increases. So what would cause a decrease in the multiplier? A decrease in the multiplier would be caused by a decrease in your marginal propensity to spend. Without looking at my options, that's what I'm thinking, okay? A decrease in the tax rate. If you decrease the tax rate, you're actually going to increase your marginal propensity to spend because people are going to have more money to spend. So that's not it. A decrease in the marginal propensity to import. If you decrease M, you actually increase Z again, right? If we're importing less, it means we're spending more domestically. So that's not it. An increase in the marginal propensity to consume, no. If you increase your MPC, you will increase Z. I'm looking for what's going to decrease Z. So that's not it. An increase in the marginal propensity to save, that's the one. Because if we increase how much we save, we decrease how much we consume. And that would decrease Z, and in turn decrease the multiplier. Number 9. The value of the simple multiplier in this model. Okay, so if you're asked to find the simple multiplier, remember the formula, 1 over 1 minus Z. But when we have government and when we have international trade, you need to remember that Z is not just MPC, but it's that, the MPC out of national income, minus your marginal propensity to import, and we have those things. We talked earlier about how we have this in the equation right there, so that's 0.43, and we have M right here. So the marginal propensity to spend is 0.37. Now that's not the answer. The answer is not A. We then take it and plug it into here. 1 over 1 minus 0.37. 1.59. Number 10, consider a simple macro model with demand determined output and the following specific parameter values. We've given you the MPC out of disposable income. So out of disposable income, that's interesting, right? Remember, that's YD. So that one will need to be, the tax will need to be taken out of that one, basically. Okay. B, the marginal propensity to consume out of national income. Oh, interesting. Okay, so this is basically MPC multiplied by 1 minus tax, whereas this is just the MPC. The marginal propensity to import is 0.23. There's your M. The simple multiplier without government and foreign trade is equal to what? Okay. So the simple multiplier without, you need to remember that you're just going to, you'll use the same formula, but without government or international trade, your Z is just your MPC. So I'm going to use 0.6 here, and that would be 2.5. With government, then it would be like what we had in the previous question. So I would do, my Z here would be MPC multiplied by 1 minus tax minus the M. So it would be 0.48 minus 0.23, which is 0.25. So 1 minus 1 over 1 minus 0.25 is 1.33. So the answer is C. All right, so that's it for this chapter. If you have any questions at all, please don't be shy. Spend some time on this one. Make sure you understand, all the relationships between the slopes, the intercepts. If you have any questions at all, you know where to find me. See you at the next one.